Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. This time, unfortunately, we are going to have to do the show without Lawrence as he is off on an adventure. I can't remember what important deeds he was doing or what evil he was fighting in some foreign land, but he's not going to be able to be with us today. We do have Mark and Lilith and the rest of the usual team. So I think, and Lawrence said, you'll be fine. So.
Well, this is Deuteronomy, so it is the priests restating stuff that was previously stated in Leviticus, or alternatively, writing the stuff that will later be referenced by the priestly source in Leviticus.
Yeah, but I will say that there are quite the meaty chapters in this book, as I've found out later on.
Is this your way of telling us you might have a little commentary?
Yes.
Just a little.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and this is Tatya. I named her. I named her after Tatiana, the lead vocalist from Ginger.
And is she our escape artist?
She is, and I'm really happy that she's not. She's mildly venomous, but not inclined to bite. She's a sweetheart. Yes, but she is good at getting out and wandering about and having adventures. Anyway, I don't recommend doing this thing with a venomous snake.
Yeah, well, alas, until the caulking dries.
Okay. All right.
Anyway.
So who is reading today?
Nominations.
Okay. Well, I guess it sounds like it's going to be me then.
Not all at once.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Emma and Mark already read, so I guess Aaron.
Yeah.
Or I can volunteer.
I
was trying to see if I could get the voice thing working. It doesn't want to play nice today.
Oh,
yeah. No one wants to read about all of these different laws.
I mean, I can read if you want.
Okay.
Amber, are you saying that God doesn't want to read today? That is kind of weird.
Yeah, it's just, 404 deity not found. I can use my regular voice, though.
He's a bit of a diva. Honestly, this is on brand for him. Let's not pretend otherwise. So we're just, sometimes you got to let the diva.
Mm.
Okay.
Tis true.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm going to read the whole chapter from the JPS version from 1985. Every 7th year you shall practice remission of debts. This shall be the nature of the remission. Every creditor shall remit the due that he claims from his fellow. He shall not dun his fellow or kinsman, for the remission proclaimed is of the Lord. You may dun the foreigner, but you must remit whatever is due you from your kinsmen. There shall be no needy among you, since the Lord your God will bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a hereditary portion. If only you heed the Lord your God and take care to keep all this instruction that I enjoin upon you this day. For the Lord your God will bless you as he has promised you. You will extend loans to many nations, but require none yourself. You will dominate many nations, but they will not dominate you. If, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kinsmen in any of your settlements in the land that the Lord your God is giving you, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kinsman. Rather, you must open your hand and lend him sufficient for whatever he needs. Beware lest you harbor the base thought. The 7th year, the year of mission, is approaching, so that you are mean to your needy kinsman and give him nothing. He will cry out to the Lord against you, and you will incur guilt. Give to him readily, and have no regrets when you do so. For in return, the Lord your God will bless you in all your efforts and in all your undertakings. For there will never cease to be needy ones in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy kinsmen in your land. If a fellow Hebrew, man or woman, is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall set him free. When you set him free, do not let him go empty-handed. Furnish him out of the flock, threshing floor, and vat with which the Lord your God has blessed you. Bear in mind that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I enjoin this commandment upon you today. But should he say to you, I do not want to leave you, for he loves you and your household, and is happy with you, you shall take an awl and put it through his ear into the door, and he shall become your slave in perpetuity. Do the same with your female slave. When you do set him free, do not feel aggrieved, for in the 6 years he has given you double the service of a hired man. Moreover, the Lord your God will bless you in all you do. You shall consecrate to the Lord your God all male firstlings that are born in your herd and in your flock. You must not work your firstling ox or shear your firstling sheep. You and your household shall eat it annually before the Lord your God in the place that the Lord will choose. But if it has a defect, lameness, or blindness, any serious defect, you shall not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. Eat it in your settlements, the unclean among you no less than the clean, just like the gazelle and the deer. Only you must not partake of its blood. You shall pour it out on the ground like water.
Okay, this is oh, at first I was going to say this is amazing. It's a good part of the Bible, not, tearing down the needy and forgiving debts after a certain amount of time, which interestingly enough, I have never, ever, ever heard any of these Bible thumpers suggest as a method of economics, despite the fact that it apparently came direct from the lips of God. And then they promote slavery. Yay. Now it's only indentured servitude. And I noticed that this is the better version, which I still think to have been written first. If you look back at Leviticus 25, the Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee, the year of Jubilee was every 49 years. It was a Sabbath of Sabbaths. Every 7 years there was a Sabbath year, and then every 7 of those there was a Jubilee year, and all the debts are wiped out and everybody goes free. Well, every male. Again, in that version, it's only Jewish males that are set free after the 6 years. And if they bring a wife and children in, they're allowed to leave with them. But if you marry him off to a woman and they have children, then those are all your property, and you can hold him hostage via love for family, which is just so delightful. Whereas the Deuteronomy version is slightly less heinous. We're still talking about slavery. It's all about degrees, but women also are allowed to go free. Of course, there's less of an implication that she's only here as a breeding stock, and possibly, maybe you just need a housemaid. Someone has to sweep out the hearth and whatnot. But yeah, it's still those who choose under no duress whatsoever to say that they love their master and really do choose to be slaves for life, I swear, still get pierced through the ear with an awl. And so you have to wonder if
but it's quite different.
Slavery.
It's a bit different from what Exodus states, because I have commented this, but I'll just mention it real quick. So Exodus 21:6 reads, "He shall take the slave before God, and he shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl." And if you notice, the Deuteronomy version says that the slave's ears is pierced into the door. Exodus doesn't say that explicitly. It could be pierced anywhere, just near the door.
Yeah, I mean, you can, if you've ever had your ears pierced, I certainly have. They do need to have something behind to sort of, obviously they have the guns, kind of pinches you from each side. But it's interesting because this is another case where there is a direct and explicit contradiction. We go back to Exodus 21. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as the men servants do. Whereas here, if your fellow Hebrew, a man or a woman, sells himself to you and serves you 6 years, on the 7th year, you must let them go free without payment of money. So there's a direct contradiction here in how women are treated.
Yeah, I think that's kind of explained with the, what's going on here. What does it mean if a slave is sold to you? So the commentators kind of say that this is not talking about a slave that is, sells himself to you. This is referring to a slave that is sold by the courts for stealing. That's the male one anyway. So the male servant is sold to you by the court. A slave that sells himself to you has slightly different rules. I can't remember if it means he doesn't go free at the end of the time or not. But
the woman in the
I guess they would have a
version is
fixed.
sold by her father explicitly.
Yeah,
So
so
in that version, you could argue perhaps she was being sold as a concubine.
yeah, so and then so I think it's Vanessa Rashi says so for the female Hebrew maidservant, so it says that you don't release her at the same the same as the other slaves. It says you should, but it does say that you should release her when she becomes marriageable age or whatever. Like you should marry her, and if not, you should let her go free. Blah blah blah. And apparently that's supposed to happen.
And just for
when
clarification, what are
puberty.
we calling marriageable age at this point?
Puberty.
Yeah.
I think it's like 12 or something. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
12 and a
Does this
half,
establish the age for a
12
bat
and
mitzvah?
I think it's the same. I don't know if it's the
yes.
same, but it's based on the same idea. Because the bat mitzvah is on the 12th birthday. I think this is supposed to be like just after or something like that. Maybe it's 12 days, 12 and 12 years, 1 day. Might be, yeah. And so this is saying if a man has sold his daughter to you, and the Shemitah has arrived before she has reached the age of puberty, then you should also set her free, with just like a man. That's kind of the novel idea.
Wait, I'm confused.
Of this chapter.
If you buy a prepubescent girl before,
yeah, so it says
you
that
have to let her go if you bought her before menstruation. Is that what you're saying?
No. So a father can sell his minor daughter
at any age.
And this is what Exodus says. Well, no, they have to be minor, I think. I don't think he can sell her if she's older.
Yeah, was that what
that
I think
seems
this is
interpretation. It actually, what it
Yeah.
actually says in the text indicates that she would be a sexual slave, because it says that he must only let her go if he is displeased with her because he has defiled
yeah,
her. So
yeah,
he
and
must demand money for her. But
yeah,
that
the commentary
that
is
seems
like
to be the interpretation to make it less shitty than the actual text.
yeah.
So
The interpretation is that that if he or his son doesn't marry her by the time she is 12, I guess, then you must let her go. And then this chapter is saying something else, which is if the Shemitah has arrived before that time, you should also let her go. So
I'm not
commentaries
understanding
are
this at all, but I'm wondering if we need to continue, if we need to go past this, or if it's just my problem.
It's just that there's two different chapters.
You're buying an underage
different.
girl. You're buying an underage girl for child
Yes.
sexual slavery, and there's a condition under which
that's not what it says.
No, the little
yeah.
girls, the ones prepubescent, would not have been sold for sex. Ideally, they would be like a maid servant. That would be a way for the family to get rid of.
But if you sell, what it wasn't in Exodus is if you sell your daughter into slavery, and it explicitly said that in the translation that I was reading, and she does not please her master.
Yeah.
The idea isn't that she doesn't please her. It means if she doesn't find what's the word, the expression in Hebrew? It's like if I find favor in your eye, sort of thing.
He's displeased in the eyes of her master.
The actual text seems to indicate sex slavery, yes, or concubinage, or wifehood, which.
But what ends up happening is if she doesn't. This is the way I read it, and I read two different versions of it. I mean, in two different places, I think, where it says if she doesn't please her master, if she doesn't put out, she gets put out.
Yeah.
I think that's reading too much into the word "please," because in English that is an innuendo. But
yeah, he doesn't give her anything. You've got an unescorted teenager gets kicked out of the house, so now she's homeless, but she's also valueless because she's interpreted to be used goods at this point.
If it depends. Again, what Isaac is saying is that the rabbinical interpretation is that this hypothetical scenario would be with a child who would work as a servant in the house until the age of puberty and then be sent back to their family. What the text actually says.
But the idea is that if someone is so poor that he sells his daughter into slavery, he should sell her to someone. And the idea is that if you buy this girl, you should marry her or give her to your son as a wife. And if not, then you have to let her go once she reaches puberty. Or in this chapter says,
because these are God's family values, so we need to get this sorted.
Yeah, God's a bastard. But in Exodus 21, and I'm contending that may be a rabbinical interpretation that is less shitty, but the actual text is more in line with what Aaron is reading, because it says, and by the way, it's not just the innuendo of please. It's if he does not please her master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her.
She's used good.
Exactly. If he selects her for his son, he must give her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first of food, clothing, and marital rights. So this is being a wife or concubine, very much. Yeah. Now, rabbinical interpretations may have tried to gloss over that and put it into a better context, and I understand the urge to do that, and that's great.
I did want to say also this is a Hebrew slave woman. If it was a non-Hebrew slave woman, then pretty much you could do whatever you want, right?
Yeah,
put a ring in her septum and lead her around. That's easier. It doesn't matter anymore.
Wasn't it the whole pleasing part also tied to whether or not she was a virgin? Or is that just
maybe you're not allowed to murder her for not being a virgin if you bought her as a slave.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah. And and also, by the way, like in this example, like the owner would marry her, will give her to her son. Like there's no consent involved in that either. This is we're talking about.
Well, that's because this comes from the belief system that declares children to be property, and not only that, but the children are responsible for whatever their great-great-grandparents did.
Only to God. You aren't allowed to punish the third and fourth generation, just the Almighty.
Yeah, and rabbinical interpretation of that is like, if they do bad, then they're punished for their ancestors, which still doesn't really help that much. It's like, and if you're good, then you get if you stay good, then you get the blessing of your forefathers. It's like
I have to step away for a quick second. Yeah. But maybe Tomer would like to share his commentary.
Yeah.
Oh, is it commentary?
There's always commentary, unfortunately. So I'll start on verse 1. At the end of every 7 years, in Hebrew, thank you, Peter. Miketz Sheva Shanim. The word Miketz has been understood by rabbinic sources as deriving from katzeh, end, and could refer to a beginning of the seventh year, according to Ibn Ezra, or to its end, as seen in Targums and Sifrei Deuteronomy 111. Weinfeld and Lundbom, however, based on Jeremiah 34:14, understood Miketz to mean a period of time. And so the phrase could be read after 7 years or during the 7th year. On canceled debts, the Hebrew is shmita, from the root shin mem tet, to drop. The reference to debts is apparent from the next verse. And Tigay writes, the word may also imply that the agricultural sabbatical, quote-unquote, found in Exodus 23, 20, and I don't know why I read 11, I think it's 21, and Leviticus 25, 2-6, is to be observed in the same year, for that in the context in which Shin Mem Tet is used in Exodus 23, verses 10-11, which states that fields, vineyards, and olive grove are to be released, quote-unquote, that is, left uncultivated, in the 7th year. Nehemiah 10:32 indicates that in the early Second Temple times, the 7th year included both fallowing and debt remission. On verse 2, Lundbom comments, in the post-exilic period, after a covenant was made to walk in God's law, people agreed to remit loans in the 7th year as the law here required, as in Nehemiah 10:32, which is 31 in the Old Testament. More than a century earlier, across the Aegean, the reforming archon of Athens, Solon, alleviated a crisis by canceling debts of the poor who could not pay them back. On one of the Aramaic ostraca from Arad, dated from the 4th century, is this inscription, quote, "Who demanded the money which he had lent," end quote, which could be a demand for payment of a debt or a decree proclaiming debt remission. Problems of indebtedness were compounded in antiquity by creditors charging exorbitant interest rates. For this reason, and in keeping with its overall aim to assert God's sovereignty over the created order and make possible a more egalitarian society, Deuteronomy also disallowed the charging of interest to fellow Israelites, as seen in 21, which is 19 to 20 in the Old Testament. The interest rate loans anticipated here were not to be for business purposes or other commercial ventures, but for the relief of poor and insolvent people who might be victims of poverty due to war, famine, pestilence, a death in the family, 2 Kings 4:1, or some other adversity over which they had no control, Exodus 22:24 and Leviticus 25:35-37. An old Babylonian text entitled the Edict of Amisaduka records a king's cancellation of debts and obligations at the beginning of his reign. He did this by means of Misharum, i.e. Justice Act, which contained other charitable provisions. His cancellation, however, did not apply to business debts.
Well, that's rude.
Now, about anyone among their own people, the Hebrew Bible reads his fellow or his brother, as seen in the KJV and JPS. Lundbom notes that the term brother in the Old Testament has a broader meaning than the usual definition and could also mean fellow Israelite. He writes that fellow and brother appear to be synonymous here, but he notes Shemariah Talmon's opinion that there is a doublet resulting from conflation. The Septuagint omits his fellow, with McCarthy explains that it's a case of, quote, facilitation of a stylistic difficulty, end quote. And the semantic text omits his brother.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It doesn't really say like his fellow or his brother. It actually kind of says,
but the vav
and,
is,
but
the vav could be
can,
like an or.
Yeah, and it could also be seen as kind of like, I think it does happen in the Bible sometimes where you just have two the same. It's kind of like his fellow, and then like you could think of it as like a semicolon, his brother, like kind of.
Yeah. But there is sometimes the tendency, specifically in religious groups, to refer to every member of the group as brothers and sisters, and that kind of fluctuates at different times. I don't know if that's a way in which we could take this particular reading.
Oh, I apologize. This brother, he's not omitted in the semantic text. It's actually the conjunction, the vav is omitted. It is omitted in 4Q Deuteronomy C. I think I misunderstood the BHQ, I believe.
Okay, so if they omit the vav, then it makes it more like, you're just saying like a list. His fellow, his brother. Yeah. I don't know what the word is for that. Yeah.
So about, again, I'm still verse 2. The Lord's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed. Nelson writes that this proclamation implies a public declaration as a religious occasion, as in Leviticus 25:10 and Isaiah 62:1. Weinfeld writes that some say that the year of remission postpones the debt claiming, but doesn't cancel it. He rejects this view because the postponement does not resolve the loaner's distress. Targum Suda Jonathan reads, because the court, Beit Dinah, has announced the remission before the Lord. On verse 3, Tigay comments, the remission applies only to debt owed by fellow Israelites, not those owed by foreigners. Similarly, the Misharum edict of the Babylonian king Amitsaduka canceled only the debts of Akkadians and Amorites in Babylon. The distinction between citizens and foreigners may be due to the fact that forgiving debts is an extraordinary sacrifice. Collecting debts is a legitimate right that members of society are willing to forego only on behalf of those who have a special family-like claim on their generosity. In practical terms, remission of debts aims to re-establish economic equilibrium within a society, and since foreigners are only temporary residents, they are not members of that society. Indeed, since foreigners were normally present in a country for purposes of trade, goods or money given to them on credit were usually investments or advance payments on goods, not loans because of poverty. And
yeah, there is another one here, which is Kuni says that the reason why the foreigner is not, you don't remit their loans on the Shemitah is because they don't keep the Shemitah. They're allowed to grow crops and sell them, and so they're not going to have any issues paying debts in the 7th year, so no need to remit them.
And it's interesting also to note that while most traditional commentators wrote that this is a mandatory commandment, Ibn Ezra writes that it's obligatory.
Wait, say it again.
He says that
mandatory
it's
and then
obligatory.
obligatory.
Ibn Ezra writes that it's obligatory.
Ibn Ezra says, you mean
What's the difference
optional?
between mandatory?
He writes it as optional.
Mandatory is you must, and obligatory means you can. It's
optional. No. It says optional.
You're obliged.
I mean, that's what my one says.
Oh,
mandatory. Mandatory is the same thing as obligatory.
Oh, yeah. So I fucked up. Sorry. I thought it was.
It's okay.
Yeah. So the mandatory bit, actually, there is a bit of a discussion about that, and so they're saying like this is a positive commandment. It says, the literal reading says, and the foreigner you shall. Done whatever that means, but I'm guessing it means to like ask for their money back. And so there's a bit of a discussion about whether, so they're like, this is a positive commandment, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you must done the foreigner, whatever that means, which means to like ask them back, like make sure, like if they're not paying you back on time, then you must go and ask them again and again. Rather than this is the actual positive commandment. The positive commandment is about the second part of the sentence, which says, and you must remit whatever is due from your kin. So you have the verse before says, do not done their fellow Israelite. So that's a negative commandment. And then the next verse is a positive commandment, which starts with, you may done the foreigner, but you must remit whatever is due to you from your kin. This is actually an old argument where they're like, this is a positive commandment about, it just makes it a double commandment, a positive and negative about not dunning your fellow, which is interesting. But yeah, this is kind of related as well to like the idea of usury as well. Like, usury is maybe not the right word, but lending with interest is not allowed to a fellow, but is allowed.
Yeah, but I think it's the neshech that is talked about when it comes to lending with interest. Yeah, I think it's later in Deuteronomy. If I'm.
Oh, it doesn't actually. It's not. It's technically.
There is a technical term for it. It's neshech.
But does that mean interest, or does that mean?
Yeah, interest. Yes, I think it is, if I remember correctly.
Or yeah, because religious Jews don't lend with interest from each other, but they're allowed to. They're allowed to go to the bank. They're allowed to go to the bank and take a loan.
And one of the commandments is that you won't charge interest on loans to other Jews.
It's actually, I've always found it an incredible irony of history that at certain points of history, Jews have become quite involved with banking as a direct result of that. Because medieval Christendom also had things against usury. But of course, outsiders are, which the Jews are always the outsider. So they could borrow gold. And when they so often were so bigoted and cruel and took other employment options away from Jewish people. But gold was something they would handle.
Yeah, carrot and a stick.
If you get Isaac or Tomer, if you get a loan from a Jewish bank, do they charge you interest?
I think they do, because they don't care about these laws.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if you don't really have like religious banks. There is a separate system actually, which is called a gemach, which is been extended over the years. The idea of a gemach is it's a acronym. It stands for Gemilot Chasadim, which means acts of kindness, and it's this idea of lending. Someone can say, "I'm going to have a lending money gemach," and you can call me, and I will lend you money for free, and you'll help me a time, you'll send it back. But people have started extending this idea of a gemach into things like a toy gemach. So someone has a bunch of toys, they're not using it anymore, their kids are growing up. They're like, okay, I'm gonna lend. People can come to my house, borrow a toy, or write your name down, and then you bring it back when you're finished with it. And people have started all these weird sorts of gemachim, wedding dresses, buggies and what they call cots and all that sort of stuff.
Now, is there any requirement that you have this paid by Monday, or someone's going to come break your knees?
No, that's definitely not what a gemach is. I mean, they're not going to lend you loads and loads of money. It's just like, it's just this. It is an interesting thing where you have this inter-community thing of like you can just open up the advertiser and see like a list of gemachim in the area, and you can get like a baby carriage or whatever.
Use of anything you want. Do they give or only lend? Is it like, because with some stuff, especially kids' toys at certain ages, you're like, we're not using this again. Go away.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
These cribs are a death trap.
You have charity shops. It's a separate thing, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe some gemachim also like just give you certain stuff.
I'm going to read a couple comments.
Nappies and stuff is they don't ask for it back.
I'm going to read a couple of comments here. Matt White says, Aaron, Vatican has the age of consent at 12, as far as I know. Well, I don't know that the Vatican is all that concerned with consent at all.
Well, yeah.
And then Iconacher says, so this is like a money back guarantee? And I think we should have read this a little while ago just to keep the context.
I should know that it's not true. The age of consent is 18.
Really?
So the Vatican considers
the funny thing is
consent higher than most of the United States. That's cool.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, the Vatican City is like comprised of mostly adults. But I guess
the Vatican cares about consent.
I know the altar boys age out at
Who knew?
16. What the hell is this?
I think I've seen Catholics say things like Mary agreed to have the baby or something like that.
Oh yeah,
I've heard priests say that. Yeah,
and
I was really shocked one time. I went to a Catholic church in Mexico, and right at the entrance on the wall, they had like marriage applications with the applicants' pictures on it, and with a big sign saying, if you have any reason to doubt why these two people should get together, or any infidelities and whatnot, then please report them, because we will not let them get married.
So it's not even good enough to do it at the ceremony. They have to put it on a post-it board.
Right at the entrance.
Nice.
Okay.
I thought you were gonna say like singles people profiles where you like,
This person has reached the age of consent.
Oh yeah.
Because I was like, wow, that's a bit extreme, putting it on the wall rather than just sending
you're
it to
able to
some
get
old
married,
woman.
and you're also able to ride this roller coaster.
Oh dear God.
So Country Fried Minis offers $5 and says, this objective study of the word God has been thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you all for taking the time to share this work with all of us. Thank you very much. And then Ms. Lud offers, and I'm sure I butchered that, but I didn't do it on purpose, offers €10 and says, still need to catch up with you 5 streams behind, but catching you live is even better. Has B Down finally given up? Is Tomer still finishing his commentary?
Always.
Thanks for all the hard work.
Tomer is my hero. He goes through so much commentary to glean what we need for each.
I actually do appreciate the work that he goes through. He actually prepares for this and like has lists of things. So
I know,
Tomer,
he's so responsible.
He's voluntarily doing what I had to do like every day in school for years.
Okay, I'll continue.
I was supposed to. I didn't do much of it.
Okay, on verses 4 to 6, Nelson comments, Verses 46 may represent later supplementary motivations and considerations. Because the law addresses the existence of poor people, verses 46 create tension, especially with verse 11. These verses seem to be related to the blessings of 8:28 verses 11 to 13. Nevertheless, the text in its present form does make sense. Verses 46 portray the world as it should be, a society without poverty, while verse 11 admits to how things really are. Verse 4 is the expected norm. Verse 11 is the temporary exception. The recurring problem of poverty is not due to some systemic fault in Yahweh's blessing or bestowed land, but is episodic and implicitly assumes a lack of full obedience to laws such as this one. The reality of poverty provides an opportunity for obedient generosity, but does not undermine the sufficiency and goodness of Yahweh's gifts.
So it's a feature, not a bug.
Yes.
So because the poverty is the result of people's disobedience. So it's the poor's fault, and they just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Maybe God is a Republican.
I mean, if there were no hungry and needy people, Mother Teresa wouldn't be able to help them.
Oh no. How awful.
Now, on verse 9, Lundbom comments, "This is a warning not to refuse a loan to the needy brother because the year of remission approaches. Such a hesitancy to loan would doubtless develop and did, in fact, in later Judaism, 1st century BCE to 1st century CE, where a means to circumvent debt remission was devised. Before making a loan, a creditor could present a declaration to the court, signed by witnesses, that his loan not be subject to cancellation in the 7th year. This declaration, established by Hillel the Elder in Mishnah Shevi'it 10.3, was called a prosbul. Hillel devised the prosbul because people were refusing to loan at the approach of the 7th year. Nevertheless, the Psalms praise righteous souls who are liberal in giving and ever willing to lend. Psalms 37, 25-26, and 112:5. Such people are known for their sense of justice, will not suffer want themselves, and their children will become a blessing."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the idea of a prosbul, which is, you might think of as that sort of legal loophole, is that you relinquish the money to the court, or I should say that you get some money from the court, and the court will take upon the debt. So the person is owing the court money, so it doesn't get remitted in the 7th year, something like that. And I don't know when the
even though
the
it
lender
very
gets the money back.
explicitly says in the text, do not refuse to loan your family money because it's approaching the 7th year. But then, I mean, there are those people who will totally take advantage of that and, refuse to work even
I mean,
if they
Hillel
can.
is
So you're like,
Hillel is praised for devising the prosbul because it really helped. Like, I mean, here is a society where it's like all debts get freed after the 7th year. Like it completely ruins the economy, I would think. Who thought of it the first wasn't perfect, let's say. And so yeah, the prosbul really did fix that issue, even if it's a bit loopholey.
Spoken like a capitalist.
Probably why it has to come from God himself, because no one would do it otherwise.
I was going to say, I think it's pretty impressive to see Moses' foresight on all these issues and potential, loopholes and things that could occur. Even like, hey, you know what? If we're going to loan any money, there should be or should not be any interest involved. When he hasn't even gotten his feet wet.
Well, maybe that's why he made that mistake. I don't know. I mean, Lilith, were you saying that in an ideal situation, this would be a good thing?
Well, admittedly, as a long-term system, I can see the problems with it, but I do think it would be an excellent thing in the economic runaway where the rich are becoming too rich and the debt is becoming a form of slavery. To say, gee, you're all so absorbed with this Bible stuff, maybe we should institute a year of Jubilee, just like it says in that special book you love so much. Because honestly, if economic pressure doesn't let up soon, shit's gonna get interesting.
I mean, you should just have a nationalized bank that can lend to poor people free of interest completely, and then rich people just pay higher taxes to cover it.
Oh, I completely endorse her year of jubilee thing. That's yeah. I mean, I hear all the time about these biblical values that nobody fucking follows.
Except for Jews.
Yeah.
Oh no, they do.
No,
they
you just
follow
admitted
only
the
worst
principle.
The Jews don't follow it either. They charge you interest.
No, you refer to the year of remission.
And
The
you
Shmitai,
don't
they
get
do
your
it in agriculture.
year of jubilee
At least
either.
in Israel, they do that in agriculture.
What the
Okay, but we
Shmitai?
have
Yeah, they do that. I mean,
aside
yeah,
from what
yeah.
we were just aside from all
Yeah.
that, I mean, we do have Christians in this country going on and on about their biblical family values, having not the first fucking clue what their sacred fables really say about this, which is largely a part of this show.
And
So
honestly,
how did
sorry, but if the rich continue to become too rich, you can institute a year of jubilee, or we can return to the ways of the French Revolution, because that was maybe the more iconic time that happened in history, but it's not the only one. It's a cycle that keeps repeating. So
yeah. So how
Okay.
did Christianity get around this? As we still like in the Middle Ages, they
besides
didn't
using the
lend.
Jews,
Yeah, and what they had that in the Middle Ages, and then they like every time the king owed too much money to the Jewish lender, he would talk to the local priest, and then all the Jews somehow disappeared from town.
Weird.
yeah, I know.
And
Well, isn't
so,
that convenient?
and then that system never stopped working. So how does it work now? How do Christians allow?
Christians just
they just say
ignore
that
it and scream about
Because
the
they
gays, largely.
don't read their book.
or did they redefine usury to mean unjust amount of usury or something
No,
like that?
they just remember how they worked out that thing where we don't have to keep the Old Testament because we're not really Jews, but we're inheritors of the new promise, and all of these are symbolic unless we want them. So all the sexual restrictions are still there, but not anything that would inconvenience me personally if I want to be a Barbie. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Barbie is much more progressive than Christianity, but honestly, they just ignore it at this point. There were justifications, there were excuses, there was some kind of, well, in the current economic system, we have to do the best for. Even C.S. Lewis was like, he mentioned it in Mere Christianity and said, look, I don't know how to do economics without lending it interest. That's where we need the Christian economist. But it would be remiss of me not to mention that 3 major civilizations have made it a point not to allow the thing on which we've based our entire economic system. So maybe think about that.
Muslims have to borrow with us, like I don't know, like I was gonna say the kosher. They have to what's the equivalent? A halal kind of version of a loan, and banks advertise that they have Sharia compliant monetary products.
Yeah, I've known observant Muslims who would have a form of credit card where basically you would pay in advance. You would put a certain amount on in advance and then be down to zero, and you could potentially go over, but as a rule, every month you would pay it to zero or overpay so that you had leeway. And that basically was, that's obviously, I'm sure there's more complicated, but that was the way that
I just have a debit card. Who needs credit?
Okay, I'll continue.
They have
On verse, sorry. Okay, on verse 12, or woman, so Tigay comments, according to Exodus 21, verses 7 to 11, a daughter sold as a slave does not go free in the same way male slaves do. She is sold back to her father or released if her master fails to fulfill certain obligations, such as providing her with a husband. Some scholars view Deuteronomy's law as superseding that of Exodus, by granting equal treatment to females instead of permitting their manumission only in a limited number of circumstances. This view assumes that the Hebrew woman of Deuteronomy 15 is the same as the daughter in Exodus 21. However, it is possible that the 2 laws refer to different cases. Exodus refers to a minor sold conditionally by her father for the purpose of marriage. Deuteronomy, on the other hand, may refer only to a girl or woman who becomes indentured because of insolvency or debt, her own or that of a husband or father with no intention of marriage. Since both types of female servitude exist simultaneously in the ancient Near East, there is no need to assume that Deuteronomy is superseding Exodus's law about girls.
Who says this?
Tigay.
Oh, because I think the thing is it says about that the court can't sell a woman who doesn't who stole or something like that, or who can't afford.
This was in payment for debt of a husband or a father, potentially, which apparently you might be able to do that without the courts.
Or like did I hear this? It sounded like Isaac was suggesting that the Bible holds women to be financially responsible for something. That they're not financially, they're currency.
As I'm saying, they can't. I'm almost sure it says in another place where like an adult woman can't be sold by the courts at all. Yeah. Interesting.
Okay. On verses 13 to 14, Nelson comments, the introductory key of verse 13 does not indicate a special subcase, as in verse 16, but a further description of the basic situation. The adverb rekam, empty-handed, occurs in a similar context in Genesis 31:42, Jacob's release from service, and Exodus 3:21, Israel's escape from slavery, suggesting a natural association with the topic of slavery. The generous gift of verse 14 is intended to break the cycle of poverty and prevent a recurrence of servitude. It comprises not only the immediate necessities of bread and wine, but also animals to provide milk and textiles over the long term and to start a new herd or strengthen an existing one. On verse 14, supply them liberally. In Hebrew, it's ha'anektanik. Yeah, ha'anektanik. The root ein nun kuf appears only here and means to serve as a necklace, as in Psalms 73:6 and BDB Dictionary. Rashi writes that this refers to an ornament worn high up on the body, where it'll be conspicuous. And Nelson writes that the verb can imply honor and dignity, as found in Judges 8:26 and Proverbs 1:9. Just found it to be interesting.
Yeah. The JPS just translates it as furnish.
Yeah. On verse 17, according to Exodus 21:6, the master, quote, shall take the slave before God, and he shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl. The Deuteronomy version specifies that the slave's ear is pierced into the door. Bechosho and Chizkuni write that the door is made of wood, and that it's better to pierce against the wood than against the rock.
Probably true.
And Tigay writes that the addition before God in Exodus indicated that the ritual had a religious dimension. Deuteronomy probably omits this phrase to turn the ritual into a secular one. Now, finally on verses 19 to 23, Tigay comments, this law recasts the one requiring sacrifice of firstborn male cattle to God, previously stated in Exodus and Numbers, with Deuteronomy's characteristic modifications. The sacrifice may be offered only at the chosen sanctuary and is to be eaten by the worshipper in a sacrificial meal. This differs from Numbers 18 verses 15 to 18, according to which the firstlings were eaten by the priests. Halachic exegesis, like Rashi and Ibn Ezra, harmonized the present law with that in Numbers by taking verses 20 to 23 as addressed to the priests. However, it is clear from verse 19 that this law is addressed to the farmers who own the cattle. See also 12:6, 17, and 14:23. It is probable, therefore, that the present law is a modification of that in Numbers, undoubtedly motivated by the same considerations that lie behind Deuteronomy's similar modification of the tithe law. With all sanctuaries closed, there would no longer be need to support local sanctuaries and their clergy with firstlings. Deuteronomy preserves the firstlings' holy status by requiring their owners to consume them in a sacrificial meal at the chosen sanctuary, and in this way uses them as a means of linking the laity to the sanctuary and the religious experience it offers.
So there's too much meat coming in, and they're like, well, okay, the priests don't need this meat. but you should come to Jerusalem, eat the meat here, so that you come more often to visit.
Yeah.
Well, that is one way to get
Don't give us meat.
tourism
Buy
industry going.
Don't give us meat. Buy our merch.
Anton Gomez posts a comment, says, "Greetings, y'all, from Mexican Hajj. If only they knew I'm listening to this from inside it."
Mexican Hajj.
I need to know what Mexican Hajj is, so would you please throw that in the comments?
I mean, Hajj is is like Muslims going on. It's kind of like related to the Hebrew word for Chag, which means like holiday or going to.
Well, no, I realize what Hajj is, but if it's Mexican Hajj,
he said he's in the
there
super.
like-
He said he's in the super sacred temple right now.
Maybe the
super
one we were
sacred
mentioning earlier that had the something about Saint Mary or Mary of whatever. Guadalupe.
Yeah, it's probably it's probably that one. Yeah, pilgrimage.
One of those Marys.
Right, in Mexico.
Oh, it's the same Mary. She just pops up in different areas because she's like a sacred whack-a-mole.
She's on the toast. Push it down. Push it down.
Do they do the washing machine as well in the Mexican Hajj where they go around in a big circle?
the washing machine. I love the way you put that.
Well, I use that term because it's what we used to call dancing in. So one of the holidays where we dance with the Torah scrolls.
Mhm.
So the big synagogue in New York, where my community's, Schneerson, where his synagogue was, people from all around the world come for the holidays, and so it's packed rafter to rafter with people, and they're quite drunk.
No, you were
So
part of the group that followed Menachem Schneerson.
Yeah, so Chabad or Lubavitch is he's known sometimes as the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which is kind of like the Rebbe, the rabbi, the grand rabbi of Lubavitch, I guess you could say.
Didn't there used to be a live show on US TV about that? Because I distinctly recall
probably when he would do his
when he was
he was one of the first people to get his talks televised in transatlantically, I think.
This reminds me when my granddaughter was born, my daughter wanted everybody to choose their grandparent name, because when I was a kid, it was grandma last name, grandpa last name. That's what was every grandpa, grandma somebody. But in other places, it's Meemaw, and other places, Pawpaw, and there's different little areas just within the United States where grandparents get different names. So my daughter decided to just have everybody, we get to name ourselves our grandparent name. So my wife is Oma, which is, I think, Vietnamese ancestry for grandparent name, and I became Pooh-Bah.
The Grand Pooh-Bah.
All right, continue, please.
Yeah, I finished my commentary.
Okay, good. So we got we did the Mexican Hajj, and are we ready to move on to 16?
Yes.
And just to be clear, he did confirm it was the shrine of the Basilica of Guadalupe to sacred whack-a-mole Mary.
Okay. The 43rd Annual Convention of the Grandistic Loyal Order of the Nobles of the Alibaba Temple of the Shrine. Okay.
That too.
Who until previously said neat.
All right, beginning Deuteronomy 16. Observe the month of Abib by keeping the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night. It took 40 years, but we did it overnight.
Sure.
You shall offer the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God from the flock and the herd, and the place that the Lord will choose as a dwelling for his name. You must not eat with it anything leavened, because that's icky. For 7 days, You shall eat unleavened bread with it, the bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Egypt in great haste, so that all the days of your life you may remember the day of your departure from the land of Egypt. No leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory for 7 days, and none of the meat that you slaughter in the evening of the first day shall remain until morning. You finish your plate before you get up from the table.
No vegetables till you finish your meat.
You are not permitted to offer the Passover sacrifice within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, but at the place that the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. Only there shall you offer the Passover sacrifice in the evening at sunset. If we didn't know when the evening was, that's also when the sunset is, just so you can piece them together and remember. The time of day when you departed from Egypt, which took 40 years, but you did it overnight.
Well, you misread
the
that.
time they set out.
It means that they set out at night.
The exit, the 1 day of exit into the desert, I suppose. The big dramatic exit with the showy stuff. But and in completely unrelated news, all of a sudden you absolutely have to celebrate it in Jerusalem at the temple every year. Wouldn't you know it? God said.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I think we touched on this last episode, that there are some festivals where the Jews, or at least in this text, the male Jews, because not the females, were required to participate in at least 3.
Yeah.
Good. You shall cook it and eat it at the place that the Lord your God will choose the next morning. And the only way you're going to know that is because some guy says so, because he says he's talking to God. And so what you do whatever you're told to do. That's what this amounts to. The next morning, you may go back to your tents. For 6 days, you shall continue to eat unleavened bread. And on the 7th day, there shall be a solemn assembly for the Lord your God, when you shall do no work.
Who's going to run the assembly then? Do they have to bring in foreigners to be like the MCs?
You shall count 7 weeks. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain. 1 week. 2 weeks. Then you shall keep the festival of weeks to the Lord your God, contributing a free will offering in proportion to the blessing that you have received from the Lord your God. Rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters, your male and female slaves, the Levites resident in your towns, as well as the strangers, the orphans, and the widows who are among you, at the place that the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and diligently observe these statutes while you keep slaves. But don't think too much about that.
We have festivals to discuss.
That's right.
You shall keep the festival of booths for 7 days, when you have gathered the produce from your threshing floor and your wine press. Rejoice near the wine press during your festival, and you and your sons and your daughters and your male and female slaves. Why do we still have slaves? Never mind. As well as the Levites, the strangers, the orphans, and the widows resident in your town. For 7 days you shall keep the festival of the Lord your God at the place the Lord your God will choose, that you only know because some rabbi tells you that that's what God said. This is where it goes. Okay. For the Lord your God.
Fancy dress.
Priest.
No.
How do you know the priests are the men in dresses? No, not those other guys in dresses. Those guys in dresses. The ones without
God
color.
designed their jewelry to be very showy with the gold and the gems and the breastplates. But drag is bad, remember.
It'll either be an all black dress or it'll be an all white dress. Well, it can be an all gold dress, but it's not going to be that dress. Anyway, for 7 days, you shall keep the festival to the Lord your God at the place the Lord your God will choose. For the Lord your God, because I have to keep telling you who the Lord is, your God, just so
in case you forget
that, will bless you, which means in magical enchantment, which puts a +5 on all your saving throws, bless you and produce in all of your undertakings and you shall surely celebrate. Yay! 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose, for the festival of the unleavened bread, at the festival of weeks, and the festival of booths. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. What will the males have in their hands?
Well, read the next verse.
Remember, God doesn't like anything that rises during his festival. It makes him feel insecure.
Don't make the obvious joke.
All shall give as they are able, according to the blessing of the Lord that the God has given you. So, my son, you are well blessed, aren't you?
You must bring it in your hand, but don't let it rise.
Yes, yes, your rod on your staff comfort me. You shall appoint judges and officials throughout your tribes, in all your towns, that the Lord, remember who the Lord is? The Lord is your God, the Lord your God, that the Lord your God is giving you. And by giving you means take from other people. That's what it means to give you. You go in and take it. And then
you're reading the fine print out loud. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah. And they shall render just decisions for the people, which means not at all just or fair or kind, or it's all cruel, but we're going to be justified because we're the ones that did it. You must not distort justice in any way that doesn't conveniently suit you. And they shall render just decisions for the people. You must not distort justice. You must not show partiality, and you must not accept bribes. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of those who are in the right.
So you
justice and only justice you shall pursue, so that you may live and occupy the land that the Lord God is giving you, by which you mean
for great justice. All their base belong to us.
You commit the injustice of taking it from them and then say that I gave it to you. So they don't get to complain. Exactly. For the glory of the empire. You shall not plant any tree as a sacred pole, because I am not having anything to do with that ex-wife Asherah.
Yeah.
Beside the altar that you make, you shall not plant any. You shall not plant any tree as a sacred pole beside the altar that you make for the Lord your God, nor shall you set up a stone pillar, things that your Lord your God hates.
What if we plant the Asherah pole behind the altar to the Lord? Would that be a better placement for him?
Behind every great god, there's a great Asherah pole.
Hell yeah.
Was the woman with a strap on?
No.
So we're ready to jump into the next chapter?
No. Yeah. Commentary, of course.
Oh, is there commentary?
Yeah, wouldn't you know? Okay.
And
so
comments.
on verse 1. Yes, it should be comments first.
Yes. Where are we in the comments? So Eric Wander says, how many days is unleavened bread to be eaten but during the Passover? 6 or 7 days? Exodus says 7, and this chapter also says 7, but it also says 6 days. So
I have a comment on this. It seems like it's not really a contradiction. As far as I read from the commentators, the scholars,
Okay.
I've read a lot of apologists who say that there are no contradictions
well, it's not
in the Bible, just as long as you ignore all the contradictions.
Well,
have you even read the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy?
Well, in this case, it's not a contradiction, and I'll explain why. When we'll get there.
Okay, when we get there. So Matt White says, Aaron, 3 shall be the number of the weeks, and the number of the weeks shall be 3. 2 weeks shalt thou not count, excepting thou proceed to 3. 5
by the way,
is right out.
Yeah, it's not. By the way, it's not. You're not counting the weeks. It's you should count for 7 weeks. You count each day. So it's actually this is the first day of the Omer. This is the second day of the Omer. And one of the funny things about the counting the Omer is that you're supposed to say a blessing before, and you only say the blessing when you're counting it for the first time. So if you were to accidentally say tonight is the 15th night, you can't say the blessing when you actually get to saying it in Hebrew, let's say.
Well, it's not
So
really
people
blessing if
like
it's
to try and
tonight is
trick
the
people, like, what's tonight's Omer? What's tonight's number? And they're like,
you got to. It's not a true blessing if tonight is the 15th night. Tonight has to be. Tonight is the night.
The night's the night.
Yeah.
As in Alma Tadero says,
Alma.
Where did they get the furnaces to make gold plates? Well, they were in the middle of the desert. They're very mobile.
I know this one. It's that pillar of flame by night business. They just held the gold really, really close to Yahweh. And
on long spoons.
Tongs. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We've read those comments. Now, let's
commentary.
listen eagerly to Tomer's commentary.
Unsarcastically. So on verse on verse 1, the month of Aviv. So Aviv is the name of the first month, as seen in Exodus 12:2 and Leviticus 23:5, and the name of the quote young ears of grain, end quote, as seen in Exodus 9:31 and Leviticus 2:14. And thus the month of Aviv is the month when the first barley crop appears, according to Ibn Ezra, Bechol Sho, and Tigay. The word for month in Hebrew chodesh has been read as new moon, and thus can refer to the first day of the month. Chazal in Sifrei Deuteronomy 1:27 wrote that, quote, to observe the month of Aviv, end quote, means to create leap years by periodically adding an extra month to the year, to coordinate the lunar year with the longer solar year, a system which, according to Tigay, was common in ancient Mesopotamia.
Yeah, because if you just have 12 lunar months, it goes out of sync really quickly. So you need to have some sort of leap month or whatever system to rectify it. So by saying keep the month where you have the Pesach in Aviv, in a specific season of the year, is saying you must have a calendar that you must keep the holiday in the right time of the year. And so the month,
so you add in that
the lunar month needs to be connected. Yeah. So yeah. So even though it's a lunar month, the holidays always fall around the same time of the year as well, because they combine the two with leap months.
So it's a mixed calendar.
Yeah.
Thus creating entire different job sectors to keep track of which month it is on which calendar and harmonizing and things.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, everybody needs work.
A timekeeper pays well because, you're paid by the hour.
I mean, only
you keep track of how many hours it is.
I think only really religious Jewish people use the Hebrew calendar, and I think maybe in Israel they use the Hebrew date for certain
they officially they use both.
Oh, they officially use both.
Yeah, in official government papers or stuff like that, it's both.
Oh, they use both.
If I recall, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but I mean, day to day, most people I think use the secular system for the year number and the name of the month and stuff, and the stuff like that.
Yeah. The secular regular calendar is the one more common.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, brought you out of Egypt by night. According to Lundbom, while the dramatic events prior to the Exodus are said to have taken place at night, as seen in Exodus 12:12, 30-31, and 42, the Exodus itself occurred in broad daylight, as seen in Numbers 33:3, in the sight of all the Egyptians. Targum Onkelos reads, God performed miracles for you at night, and Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, you shall eat it, i.e. the Paschal, by night. Rashi writes that Pharaoh gave permission to leave at night, as in Exodus 12:31. Ibn Ezra writes that the Exodus occurred in the early morning, when it was still dark, and so Scripture refers to it as night. Nelson writes that he writes that the tradition that the Exodus happened by night is unique to Deuteronomy. And Lundbom notes Menachem Haran's opinion that the Passover has nomadic origins, since nomads typically eat at night.
Yeah, I'm sure I remember hearing the apologetic of so they have the Pesach offering in the evening, and then at midnight is the firstborn are killed. Then Pharaoh lets them go out, and then they start leaving more or less immediately. And by the time the column has left, it's the sunrise. So they technically left while it was still night. So Deuteronomy is fine.
Yeah. Now on verse 2, an animal from your flock or herd. According to Exodus 12, 3-5, 20, and 25, the Passover was brought only from the flock. Tigay notes that since Exodus 12, verses 24-25 states that the rite is to be observed in the future, it is presumed that the Passover was limited to sheep and goats in the future. Verse 2 seems to contradict this. He notes that halachic exegesis, like Sifrei Deuteronomy 1-9, favored Exodus and added that the herd, and in verse 2, refers to extra offerings in honor of the festival. Tigay writes that this view was adopted in late biblical time, as seen in 2 Chronicles 35, verses 7-13. However, he writes, the difference between Exodus and Deuteronomy may be due to the fact that the original Pesach in Exodus was offered by individual households, for which even a single head of small cattle might have been too much to consume, as seen in Exodus 12:4. Whereas Deuteronomy deals with a time when the sacrifice would be made at the central sanctuary, and many households could share a larger animal. Another possibility is that the Pesach offering originated at a time when the Israelites owned primarily sheep and goats, compare Genesis 46:32-47:4, and that Deuteronomy reflects later conditions when large cattle had also become important in their economy. On verse 3, for 7 days eat unleavened bread. The Hebrew is Shiv'at Yamim Tochal Alav Matzot. Literally, for 7 days you shall eat on it Alav Matzot. The word Alav appears in the first part of the verse. Do not eat with Alav bread. And Weinfeld notes that this word has been a problem for translators and commentators. It is agreed that the second Alav cannot have a similar meaning to the first Alav, since it is clear that the first word refers to the Passover sacrifice, but the second word cannot, since the Passover is not to be eaten for 7 days, as seen in 4:7. Targums Suda Jonathan reads, unto his name, and Sa'ad Gaon, you shall eat after it matzot for 7 days. Chizkuni writes, you are to eat matzot on account of the Passover sacrifice, which you offer as a memorial of the exodus from Egypt. And Weinfeld argued that the editor who worked on this section referred to one of the suggested interpretations, and when writing verses 3-4, he combined an already prepared material, and thus arose the problem of the second alav.
Okay.
So it could be a typo, but
yeah.
Let's say not.
Anyone know, before you move on to the next one, Tomer? Anyone know about what's the issue with the unleavened bread, other than the whole thing that since you're commemorating the Passover and they were instructed to leave in haste, which I've made bread before. It usually takes maybe 15-20 minutes to make leaven, so it doesn't take much for leaven to be made. But I guess if you got to leave in a hurry. But is there anything else that you guys know? What's the problem?
I think that God is just scared of anything that rises by itself.
Because it fills with air pockets, and air is his thing, because he's literally full of hot air.
The idea that it's commemorating the Exodus and them taking out bread and didn't have time to rise, and that I think that's like a later.
I'm going to call bullshit on that, because
right?
they had time to go to all of their Egyptian captors, right, and borrow money and camping supplies. Think about that.
I think the idea is that they had stuff, but they also took like fresh dough on their backs.
All right, just imagine your slaves say, hey, can I borrow a bunch of money and camping equipment? Oh, we're not doing it.
Also, it's apparently the responsibility of those slaves and their God that your kid just died. But God has somehow made you favorably disposed towards them, which is totally legitimate and much true, very believe. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure none of this was added later for dramatic effect.
And let's not
I'm
forget
sure that
the giving away of the jewelry and gold and all kind of precious things as well.
Oh God,
so it was just like
unharden
when
their
the
heart.
Canaanites, when God gave them the land, and the Canaanites and all those other tribes decided, oh, well, let me just lay down on your sword then.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, is it possible that maybe the Egyptians invented leaven and there's some sort of hidden polemic there? Because I think they did.
Well,
maybe
it
like
could be
baked
that
bread, maybe.
the type of bread was like you could bake it quickly. I mean, I have Lundbom who writes, unleavened bread or matzot was flat bread made of unleavened barley dough. It was baked quickly and probably resembled today's pita bread found in Jerusalem and elsewhere in the Near East. Yeah, so it could be, unleavened bread was eaten at ordinary meals, though usually when food had to be prepared at short notice. Genesis 19:3, Judges 6:19, and 1 Samuel 28:24. So basically, matzot are made quickly. So
one of the things I like about bread as a staple, I mean, it's like it's the oldest thing that people have, created / discovered, and it came in two forms. I mean, you talk about leavened and unleavened, but I'm talking about liquid and solid. Which reminds me, I'm out.
Oh no!
A tragedy.
Whoa!
I have run completely out of liquid bread.
Yeah. So I think if we look in Exodus, it talks about two separate holidays. There is the festival of Passover and a festival of unleavened bread. And I think Lawrence brought it up, the idea that it possibly was two separate holidays, one after the other. One was maybe commemorating a Passover. The second one, the unleavened bread, was just a harvest sort of festival. Maybe not harvest, I should say. Harvest of the barley festival, whatever.
Yeah, it's harvest-ish. It measures from the sickles touching the grain.
Yeah, and
it's related to that, and
10th.
Yeah, and the counting of that starts from the second day of Passover, which is the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the day after the Passover day, and so it could be that the bread's got nothing to do with the Passover story, Exodus story, and it is more of a harvest food that is traditionally eaten at that time, and maybe it's you want to partake in the harvest, so you make something quick. I don't know.
Lawrence would point out, as he has in the past, so in absentium, we remember you, Lawrence. He would be the one to point out that this is also an indication that putting these two festivals together may have been a later thing, where there was a festival of unleavened bread, there was the myth of the Passover. These were not necessarily, so they attached a story, much like Christmas, they attached a famous story from their religion to an existing holiday period that was already going to have to be celebrated because people were too used to it anyway, found ways to weave the stories together and made it a big thing. Just like,
Right.
Jesus, if he was ever born at all, was definitely not born on December 25th, and nobody in the early church ever celebrated it like that. But, once you had to come up with a liturgical calendar and you need something in the middle of the winter or people get stabby.
Yeah, so possibly,
and counterpoint to Easter.
Right, so Exodus would be an earlier form, right, where they're separate, and then Deuteronomy is a later form where it's just like, oh, it's just one festival.
Yeah, and then the editors tend to be like a little smoothing over, a little bit of smudge the edges and stitch that bit together. And
there's a Sabbath in between as well.
Yeah,
the day after Passover is a big Sabbath that also precedes the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. I talked about that in one of my
the
episodes.
Feast of Unleavened Bread it begins with a day. Oh no, it doesn't, does it?
And that's kind of one of my
that is the day of
criticisms
Passover, yeah.
of the Gospel of John, where he has Jesus die the next day. If you compare that with what Matthew and Luke said, it's like one has him on Thursday, the other one has him on Friday, and it's a matter of one says Passover, the other one says the Sabbath. And
right, so the Sabbath is like the day after Friday, but with regard to the first day of Passover being called a Sabbath, I don't think that's not saying that's the day of the week that it happens, because it can happen on almost any day of the week. It's just
Right.
that it's just that it's a day where you don't work, like Sabbath. I think it's called an exaltation or something in the translation. Like the first and last day of the holidays are different from the middle days, the intermediary days.
Yeah, and I'm like you said, like most Christians think that there's just one Sabbath, but there's many different applications for a Sabbath. It seems like.
Right.
Mark, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you using a green screen?
I am.
Okay. Because your library was intimidating me.
It looks really nice. Doesn't it? Yeah.
If those are real books, you got to share, buddy.
There's the real one.
Oh man, I need to get a green screen.
I mean, I got a cool library, but it's not that big.
Oh, you got a library of snakes behind you. Like,
okay, so Miss Lud offers 20 euros and says, living in Austria, I, atheist, was registered Catholic within the state by my atheist mother until I was 18. I resigned because the church can tax adults, state sanctioned, screws up the statistics, so keep the hope up.
So there's anomalous data.
Apparently in Germany and Austria, or I guess maybe some other countries, they have church taxes.
Yeah, there seems to be, everyone is registered to a religious organization and you have to like go in and be like, no, I am anti-religious. Stop giving them my money. I hate them. Like, so yeah, I'm surprised that their mom registered them as Catholic, but maybe that was just sort of the default setting. If you don't click something else, you get Catholic.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that the Satanic Temple needs to branch out. Because we need alternative religions to sign up as.
ACAB. Assigned Catholic.
Oh, I was thinking of a totally different ACAB, which is also not a religion, but would be funny to register as.
Yeah, I had to make a formal request to be removed from the rolls of Mormonism. Having attended church exactly once when I was 11, somehow didn't keep me off their rolls. I mean, I was baptized at 8, attended one church service at 11. That's it. That's all. I still had to write a formal request, wherein they sent me a letter advising, and I had to sign this and like notarize it, whatever, to make sure how formal it is, that I am aware that I am endangering my immortal soul to eternal damnation by not being Mormon. Now, as I am the only one in this particular group who was ever baptized Mormon, did you all know that you were automatically by default going to hell?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not surprised.
I mean, I've been told a time or two by, everyone.
Actually, even when I was a Christian, I was threatened by hell. I think one of my favorite encounters with a street preacher was when I was literally with a group of young adults from my church coming out of a completely PG-rated movie that we had just gone to see for kicks, that we were all in the choir together. Like, it was the most above board group of people doing the most above board thing you could ever. And there's some jackass standing there with a sign. Is like, have you heard of hell? And I just look at him. I'm like, yeah, I heard they have great drinks. Dealing with that shit.
All the best philosophers and celebrities and all the best people are there.
I've heard they have a great hotel too, as well.
Says the Exodus. That's true. One of these days, I sincerely hope that I end up back in Trondheim, Norway, just so I can spend another night in Scandic Hell. That was my favorite hotel ever, and I've only been there one night. So Trevor Wright says the Exodus happened. Since Egypt conquered the Levant during this time period, wouldn't it be considered Egyptian territory? So how does this prove that they were leaving Egypt?
Maybe it was an Egyptian exodus.
That sends you to hell.
Yeah. Pre-Civil War, it was a lot easier to cross the Mexican border into Texas because there wasn't one.
True.
Yeah. So Alma Tadero says Mormons will baptize you as Mormon even if you are dead.
Yep.
Yeah. So you have
They-
to put it
they
in your
ba-
will. I'm not fucking Mormon.
Put it on your
They did
tombstone.
what did they did a
Oh.
posthumous baptism of Anna Frank.
Oh, they've
Oh.
done
Yeah.
at least 3 of Anne Frank, but the one that back before Bill Maher became a total piece of shit, it was like the father-in-law of this woman who's, you know, her husband is like the prophet, and he was like an atheist. He was like, I have nothing to do with this. They still, the minute he was dead, they posthumously baptized him. So Bill Maher did an unposthumous baptism with his wizard cap and wand, because why not, you know?
Can't hurt.
In
Literally cannot hurt.
In all fairness, Arn, so if we're all baptized Mormon and we all go to the Mormon heaven, they're in for a shock when we show up.
Oh, especially
I
because,
don't know that.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, especially because as a woman, I would be expected to become the divine wife of a Mormon who is good and pure and became a god of their own planet and bear him children forever. And I would really, really like to meet the man who thinks he can make me do that.
Do you suppose that's how Yahweh and Asherah happened?
Oh,
That's
I'm
what
a
I
little
meant.
more interested in Asherah. Asherah is a big reason that I chose the name that I did when I realized that Amun-Ra and Jehovah were both married to the same woman. Whether you call her Asherah or whether you call her Atherat, it was very close. But it was Amun-Ra's wife. It was Amen's wife, and it was also Jehovah's wife. And I'm like, there's an awful lot of commonality here. So there was a. Go ahead.
I think it is a Semitic goddess though that like Egyptians adopted later. No. Like,
I don't know if
Well-
Egyptians ever adopted it.
For Asherah?
Athera?
Yeah, Asherah was Jehovah's wife, and she was
Yeah.
Amen's wife.
And-
Now, what I
That's,
noticed was that Amen was already a template for the god of Western monotheism. Amen being the god of air was
The
already
sky god.
literally a spirit. And then when you combine him with the sun, Ra, right? Well, then you become Amen Ra. My name is already Aaron, so I just chose the posting name Aaron Ra, and I just wanted to come up with that name as a Usenet handle to give a nod to what I saw was the template of the god of Western monotheism was Amun Ra, and they were both married to the same. They both had the same wife, so I thought that was significant.
that was significant.
Heavenly
And
threesomes.
what I'm getting from that is that I'm allowed to have at least 3 husbands.
Okay, I think I'll continue.
Yeah.
Lilith, but how
So-
are you going to be on top all the time then?
No, there's all sorts of simultaneous arrangements.
I weep for your lack of creativity, Peter. I really do.
Although I do have to
Feel like
say,
Sounds like an episode opportunity.
and we have to thank Emma for this one. I found marrieddance.com this week, which is a Christian sex toy shop. I'm not even kidding.
Oh God.
And one of the things is a game
Let's
that
move
has
on.
over 200 sex positions for married Christians. You have to just go there. marrieddance.com. You will not believe what
They
they
need the
say.
help.
Is there like
I
a position
need the help.
named Trinity that involves a third party?
I don't
They already
know.
have the missionary.
I don't know.
Christian sex toys.
Christian,
I saw that movie. It starred Linda Blair.
no, they have flavored rings that men can put around their penises, and they've got.
That's fine, Peter.
They've
Yeah,
got-
you can shut up now.
Hold on,
Yeah,
they've got.
no need to-
they've
no
got-
need to describe. No.
They've got toys
We
Yeah.
can
to
all
help.
go to a normal
help
store
you-
and assume that they have the same version.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
I
never
thought
mind.
the only Christian.
Homer wants to pull wants to
Yeah,
save the ratings on this show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Christian sex shop is more important. I get
Yeah,
it.
I would have thought the only toy they would have had was just a chastity device or whatever.
Yes.
Oh, they've
they
got
have that
sex.
too.
Yeah.
They've got sex furniture, Isaac. You're not going to believe when you go there.
Okay, Tomer is going to die.
They
Let's stop and
do.
get back to the
You can buy that in a regular church shop, furnishing.
I mean, yeah, you can go to Adam and Eve, but this is,
And
Stupid
the funny thing
Christian.
is, people can't blame me because you could all get to blame Emma Thorne for this one. He found it.
Damn it, Emma.
What I want to know is where do you get that blanket with the little hole in the middle?
There are several
That is
things with little holes
that
in the
a-
middle.
urban
A Muslim?
legend. That's an urban legend. No one actually does.
How do
that.
we always end up here?
Because there's a Dutch guy
Also,
We're
in
trying
the
apparently,
to
back
make
room.
There's
Yeah.
there's swings and slings and a
Okay,
stool.
commentary.
yeah.
Yes, commentary.
Are you all done? Good.
Yep.
So,
and a suction cup.
I think
What's
everybody's
wrong?
checking this top.
yeah, it's time to shut up now.
What?
Okay. So about verse 3. Nope, don't. Okay, verse 3. Bread of affliction. In Hebrew, it's lechem oni. The word oni
Mhm.
could be read as affliction, as in the Septuagint, Vulgate, and Peshitta, from the root ein nun hey, to anguish. Rashi comments that this is the bread which memorializes the anguish the Israelites suffered in Egypt. And Nelson writes that this bread draws the Exodus story into connection between Passover and unleavened bread, and perhaps affliction reflects the tradition behind Exodus 3:7. Another reading is bread of the poor, as suggested by Bechosho, Chiskuni, and Sfono.
Yep.
And
And there is another reason why we call it the bread of our affliction. Especially if you look at the more Western flatbread, like cracker like matzah, we call it the bread of our affliction because of what it does to your intestines. Really,
lots of fibers.
no, it's not. It's the part of it.
I mean,
it's
you
very-
have like matzahs that have fibers. So.
Yeah, but it's like it's one of those things that like everyone has to go to the toilet after the meal, like to struggle a bit.
Okay.
Oh dear, that's unfortunate.
On
It's quite
verse
heavy,
4.
I think. Yeah.
On verse 4, let no yeast be found. The Hebrew is velo yir'eh lecha se'or, which literally reads, no leaven shall be seen by you. Chazal in Sefer Deuteronomy 1:3:1 understood this to mean that the prohibition of looking at leaven is applicable only to leaven made by Jews, but not by Gentiles. And Tigay writes that this interpretation serves as a warrant for temporarily selling leavened goods to Gentiles, and so to avoid the economic hardship that would result from the destruction of large quantities of leavened goods.
Yeah, it's a common thing to sell your comets, your leaven products, blah blah blah, to a non-Jewish person with the intent of buying it back after Passover. So they sell the cupboard where it is, and it's like, okay, you don't own it. So
On verses 5 to 6, Lundbom comments, in Deuteronomy, the Passover sacrifice may not be carried out in one's town, but must be done at the central sanctuary. In Egypt, the Passover lamb was killed at home, and the blood daubed on the lintel and doorposts of the house, Exodus 12 verses 21 to 28. But where was the Passover sacrifice carried out in the pre-Deuteronomic period? Was it at a nearby high place, or at a solitary altar in one's town or village, or at home? Some believe that Deuteronomy moved the Passover sacrifice from the home to the central sanctuary, while others think that Passover, like other communal feasts, was celebrated early on at a local shrine. Haran says that the present injunction can only be directed against offering the Passover sacrifice at a worship site other than the central sanctuary. In the Second Temple period, the lamb was killed in the temple courtyard, after which the meat was taken home to be roasted and eaten. When Jesus celebrated the Passover with his disciples, they would have slaughtered their lamb at the temple and then found an upper room, quote unquote, in the city where they could prepare the meat and eat the meal together, as seen in Mark 14, 12 to 16, Matthew 26, 17 to 19, and Luke 22, 7 to 13.
All right, that sounds right. So at least at this later period, they're keeping you have to come here and do the sacrifice at our location if you at all can.
I'd imagine they would do like the aftercare, the salting and rinsing and stuff. Probably they'd also do like in the temple courtyard or whatever, because that's quite a big job.
And I'd imagine they're also thinking, well, if we're about to participate in a holy festival, then one cannot get blemished or, ritually impure because you're handling a dead animal. So it's like, here comes the temple offering the services so that you can participate. And so
you're not unclean if you're handling the sacrifice in the temple, and then
I don't think. No, the body of a slaughtered animal is not impure. Not in any.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. On verse 7, roast it. It says in the NIV, it reads, the Hebrew is vebishalta, which means and you shall cook it. The verb bashal is generally used for boiling water, as seen in 14:21, Exodus 23:19, and 2 Kings 4:38. If this is the case here, then this contradicts Exodus 12 verses 8-9, which orders to roast the Passover and explicitly forbids to cook it in water. Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and Rashbam wrote that bashal here refers to roasting. Lundbom notes that the Akkadian bashalu can mean boil, roast, bake, or cook a meal. According to 2 Chronicles 35:15, Josiah's Passover sacrifice was bashal in fire, i.e. they roasted it. The Septuagint reads, you shall boil and roast. And McCarthy notes Weber's opinion that this reflects the Alexandrian practice of for Passover. Targum Suda Jonathan reads, and you shall dress. Yeah.
Okay.
On verse 8, this verse seems to contradict verse 3, which says to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. Rashi says, 7 days from the old crop and 6 from the new. Chizkuni and Abavanel read, after leaving for home on the first day, you shall eat unleavened bread for 6 days more. Some, like Ibn Ezra, Tigay, and Nelson, wrote that verse 8 highlights the initial 6 of the total 7 days of eating unleavened bread, and then lays special emphasis on the 7th. And 4Q Deuteronomy C reads 7 days instead of 6.
So it's like a week with the Sabbath on either end, kind of a vibe.
Yeah. It's
kind of a hell of a weight loss ritual.
I didn't include this on my commentary about verse 9, counting 7 weeks. There is a comment by John Cassian, which I just found and I want to read, from Conference 21:22. There was plainly realized the number of this festival, which we read was figuratively foreshadowed in the Old Testament too, when it was ordered that at the end of 7 weeks the bread of first fruits was to be offered to the Lord by the priests. This, in very truth, is recognized as having been offered to the Lord by the preaching of the apostles, with which they are said to have exhorted the people on that day, in Acts 2:14 and 41. This was the true bread of the first fruits, which was proffered at the beginning of the new teaching, when 5,000 men were filled with the gift of its food, and which consecrated to the Lord a Christian people newly born from the Jews. Yeah.
Rip P-Town.
I mean, that's somewhat better articulated, but just as irrational. And frankly, Jesus, no wonder all of Western society is known for its cultural appropriation, because Christianity is just culturally appropriating everything from Judaism you can get your greasy little fingers on and twisting it to your own ends.
Yeah. And it's that on both ends. It's the main focus of missionary work as well, is that cultural assimilation.
I thought the main focus of missionary was procreation without enjoyment.
Hey, missionary can be enjoyable.
Maybe that's
anything can be enjoyable if done right, but
minimal enjoyment.
It just takes practice.
Variety is the spice.
Unless you find that Christian sex toy shop, and then maybe it gets a little more fun.
Yeah, let's
they
forget
have
about
sheets
that.
and ladders.
Why is it? Nah, it's going off topic as well.
Jacob's ladder.
Leave the poor children alone. At least keep your indecent jokes relevant to the text. That's I just try and make sure my dick jokes fit with the context of what we're saying. That's all.
The entire book is dick jokes.
Yeah, genocide. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
I put that limit on myself with regard to posting memes in the Discord. Join the Discord. He's not here, but join Lawrence's Discord. And I put that limit that the memes I post should be relevant to the atheism, religion, whatever. And actually, it's still pretty easy to find lots of jokes.
Have you met Behemoth?
Okay.
The sinews of his stones are wrapped together.
Okay. On verse 10, Festival of Weeks. In Exodus 23:16, it is called the Feast of Harvest. Compare Exodus 34:22. Nelson writes that this act of renaming indicates that a special emphasis of this observance is a deliberate counting of days from the start of harvest. Lundbom, citing Haram, writes that nowhere in P, the priestly source, and H, the holiness code, is this holy day called a Chag, festival. In Leviticus 23:16-21 and Numbers 28-26, it is called the Day of First Fruits, which suggests that a pilgrimage to the temple may not have been required. Furthermore, this feast is omitted from Ezekiel's list of feasts in Ezekiel 45, verses 21-25. During the Second Temple period, the Feast of Weeks was practiced in Jerusalem, as seen in Josephus' Antiquities 14:337, 17:254, and Acts 2:5-11. Verses 13-15, Weinfeld comments, the festival of booths, in Hebrew Chag HaSukkot, is also called the Feast of the Lord in Leviticus 23:29, the Feast in 1 Kings 8:2-65 and Ezekiel 45:25, and the Feast of Ingathering in Exodus 23:16 and 34:22. During the ingathering, farmers used to go to the fields and vineyards and live in a booth, in Hebrew sukkah, to protect the crops. These kinds of booths are known from the agricultural reality of the biblical period in Isaiah 1:8, Job 27:18, the Chazalic period in Talmud Sukkah 8b, and to this day. It is possible that in biblical times, the people would have feasts and celebrations in fields and vineyards during their ingathering, as seen in Judges 21:19-21. Deuteronomy preserved only the name of the Feast of Booths, with no commandment to sit inside the booths, no hint of the people's celebrations in the field settlements, and no mention of other agricultural practices which are found in the Torah, like Leviticus 23:40. The consistent ideology of centralization dictated here the establishment of the festival in the temple, in a place where the Lord chooses, while ignoring the agricultural ritual identity of the rest of the territory. On verse 19, Nelson comments, verse 19 is apparently addressed not only to judges, but to the you, quote-unquote, of the whole citizenry, making justice a communal responsibility. Although 3 coordinated prohibitions may reflect a pre-Deuteronomic model for judgment, it is more likely that 2 of them derived from Exodus 23:6 and 8. Verse 19 picks up from Exodus 23, verses 1-8, only what applies to judges and officials, quote-unquote. The Deuteronomy version widens the narrower focus of the poor in Exodus 23:6 into a demand for justice in general. Verse 19b is obviously a proverb or wisdom saying parallel to that used in Exodus 23:8, but it replaces the rare pikechim, clear-sighted perhaps, of Exodus by the more predictable chachamim, wise. The partiality, quote-unquote, of verse 19 is defined in Leviticus 19:15, Proverbs 24:23 and 28-21. Yahweh too is impartial, as in Deuteronomy 10:17. On verse 21, beside the altar you build to the Lord your God. Lundbom comments, an Asherah next to Yahweh's altar would make the Canaanite goddess Yahweh's consort. Yahweh would be replacing Baal, thus assimilating Yahwistic worship into Old Canaanite worship. Nevertheless, this very thing seems to have happened during the monarchy. An inscription turned up at Kuntilat Ajrud in the southern Negev, dated around 800 BCE, makes reference to Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah. David Noel Friedman believes that circa 800, when Jehoahaz and son Yehu ruled in the northern kingdom, an official cult in Samaria may have sponsored the worship of Yahweh and his consort Asherah. Baruch Margalit goes on to suggest that the imagery of Israel as Yahweh's wife, which appears in Hosea a half century later in Hosea 2:4-22, which is 2-20 in the Old Testament, I believe, and survives in Jeremiah 2:2, 3:1-20, and in Ezekiel chapter 16 and 23, could be an implied polemical response to this feature of Canaanite religion. And finally, on 22, Cohen-Zemach comments, the prohibition on erecting pillars in verse 22 raises questions, since it's known that the patriarchs and Moses erected pillars, as seen in Genesis 28:18-22 and Exodus 24:4. It seems that there was a pre-Deuteronomic period where Israelite worship used legitimate ritual objects. Some read the verse, "You shall not erect a pillar that the Lord your God hates," i.e., the prohibition applies to certain types of pillars that the Lord detests. The pillar mentioned in Isaiah 19:19 is legitimate since it has no ritual use. The Septuagint and Samaritan text on Exodus 24:4 changed the term pillar to stone, possibly to assimilate the verse to the law of Deuteronomy. And that's it for my commentary.
Harmonization. Everywhere there's harmonization.
I wonder what God's opinion was on an unholy meat obelisk.
I'm surprised there was no mention of Asherah, the worshiping the stick and all like that. We know where this is from. Why do these commentators not mention that?
Well, it did about Asherah. It did. Lundbom, I think.
Yeah, they did mention that the Asherah, the inscription that we brought up.
Oh, that's right. Because if you put them up there, then you're still associating them. Yes, you're right. You did read that. I forgot. All right. So we have no more comments to read. We're almost at time. So we're going to be doing Deuteronomy 17.
Yeah.
On Saturday. We all good for that?
Yes.
I don't know. I should let everyone know. I'm going to be traveling for holidays and family things, and I will be back in the new year. I may still have access to the internet and maybe like headphones and my phone. But
you're going to be in the
have...
UK. Enjoy the fuck out of the UK.
I will. I really will. And I got.
Are you going to be in the city at all?
I'm sorry. There's a holdover and then a flight north. I wish I could come.
Where are you going to be in the UK?
Just a little bit outside of Yorkshire. So it's going to be sort of country living, very, sheep and small towns.
Well, why was I thinking that if you're going to be in England, you're going to have to be in London? I mean, I just always.
Well, I have to fly into London, and I would love to visit London. I would love to visit Isaac. I would love to see the place where the fire of London stopped at the feet of John Donne's statue, since he is my favorite poet. But it's there's several reasons for this trip. One of which is my sister who lives in England, who got engaged, and so it's all happy news. But anyway, I will try and pop in whenever I can. But you will probably
don't knock yourself out. Enjoy your trip. I've been very lucky that pre-COVID I was able to visit London like twice a year for a few years.
Ooh,
and I enjoyed the fuck out of that. And COVID just wrecked everything.
It really did. It really did.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been to London once since, and that's it. And it I lament it because it's my favorite city, and my second favorite city is Melbourne. Just in case anybody's curious. But enjoy the hell out of it.
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
And I promise to have some delicious. Is there any food I must have? English food?
Oh no, English food is awful, but they have the best access to the anglicized curry.
That is true. Well, yeah, but I'm going to the country, so we're likely to get some good Yorkshire pudding and you know.
There's such a thing.
How about
English
some
breakfast,
spotted dick?
English breakfast, English breakfast, cottage pie. I don't think I've ever had spotted dick, but apparently it's pretty good. That's a dessert, by the way, I think.
Probably.
With some other desserts that that are pretty good, but yeah, I mean, generally, like most people enjoy an English breakfast, but you know, it's difficult to go bad with.
And since
I always find myself down on Brick Lane getting the hottest possible vindaloo.
Since we covered it,
absolutely be your vibe.
Lilith, since we covered it on the last show that you can't eat blood, you'll have to have black pudding.
Yeah, I suppose I will. Well, I'll represent the blasphemers then. At least have a bite. So what would a holiday be without a little blasphemy?
Yeah. All right. Well, I will see most of you this weekend. Lilith, enjoy.
Thank you.
Arn, do you want to plug Thursday's show real quick?
Oh yeah. We're going to be interviewing Natalia Reagan on Thursday for
nice
matter of fact science. I'm looking forward to that. I've seen a number of her stand-up routines. I've seen her perform on Neil deGrasse Tyson's show. So she's amusing in that she does she's a science communicator like I am, but she's also a stand-up comedian and does a pretty good job with that. And she's also a paleontologist, or excuse me, a primatologist. You know, much like Gutsick Gibbon. So wrap all of that together. We got a good, decent package there. So I'm looking forward to it.
It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.